So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Mr. Atul Tripathi to this webinar. I've known Atul for a number of years, a great thinker with a lot of deep experience in AI and machine learning. He has been associated with Sabudh for a while now too. And very kindly hosted a number of our interns while he was working as a consultant at the National Security Council Secretariat. He is one of those versatile people that can speak on pretty much any topic with authority. We struggled to agree on what the title of this webinar should be. He can speak about social listening and how that can be used not only in business applications but of course security applications too. He has great insights in cybersecurity and AI, and as we're going to hear from him today, it's about finance and AI, of course the list of topics that he can speak on can go on and on. So Atul, thank you firstly for agreeing to speak here and take out time from your busy schedule to speak to all of us here. We're really looking forward to listening to the gyan that you always give us whenever we meet. And so again, I'll hand over to you with a big thank you for agreeing to do this.
Hello, am I audible to everybody?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. So, thank you, Dr. Sarabjot, for your kind words, and I'm very happy to be associated with you. I mean, it's been a great learning for me as well, personally speaking, after being associated with you, to be very truthfully telling you. And it gives me an immense pleasure to, having worked with a lot of 4-5 interns from your some Sabudh. It was actually that time when I realized the value that Sabudh is bringing to not only the people, but the society on the whole. And that is what has got me very, very excited about Sabudh as an organization and the initiative that you have undertaken. To be very truthfully telling you, it gives me a real pleasure. And thank you for the kind words that I can speak on any topic. I mean, I'm sure there are things that I can't speak on, but I mean, coming a word from an erudite person like yours, it really carries a lot of weight for a person like me. I'm very grateful and really thank you for the very nice and kind introduction that you've given me. So, okay. So actually, when we decided, we were deciding rather what topic should we talk about, me and Dr. Sarabjot, we were thinking, I mean, we can talk on a lot of things like social media listening and this and that. So we said that let's talk about something on finance, because that is one area that is everybody wants to work in. It's very exciting, because money is the most exciting thing in life for all of us. I mean, so I thought like how, let me just try and share my experiences and whatever little I've had in my 16 years career, that about how application development and artificial intelligence is taking place in the world of finance. So we started off with this topic, and then I thought like, okay, finance is a very large area. Which ones should we be talking about? Which ones are the ones that we should be looking to? So I thought like, let me just find out certain areas, and then I came across very common areas that are in today's world, I would say they are very, very going to be important. So today I'll be talking about 2 to 3 things primarily. One is on what is called as fraud analytics. Now that's a very exciting area. Now I wanted to share these perspective because a lot of young people want to make a great career in the world of artificial intelligence. So one of the areas that one can do is fraud analytics. The second one I would like to be talking about will be in the world of banking and finance. So banking and finance is a very large area, to be very truthfully telling you. And the third one is about insurance. So how insurance is happening in today's world, so we'll just take these things forward and we'll discuss about it as we go about. So you must be seeing this James Bond thing. I really like to start with a Bond movie type. Most of my talks, you will see starting off with a Bond movie. because A, I'm a Bond fan, and B, I believe the fictions that were there is coming all to reality. If you look back and in retrospect, you will find, all of us will think, oh, that was a fantasy, but no, it's no more a fantasy. It is actually truth that is coming out. So Bond movies, I have always believed, are ahead of their time. So if you look at this thing, Die Another Day, I mean, if some of us have seen this movie or all of us have seen this movie, one of the things that this movie talks about is about diamonds. So there's a North
Atul
Korean.
sir, sorry, I can't see your presentation. I don't know about the others. I can only see your list of PowerPoint files here.
Is it? Just let me just share that once more.
Okay.
Now can you see that?
Can anybody else just validate that? Are they able to see it? Because I'm only seeing the Windows Explorer.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, just give me a moment. Let me just. Okay, just give me a moment. Let me just again start.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Now can you see that?
Yes, perfect.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I hope now you can see that Bond thing, right? I was talking about.
Yes, Die Another Day.
Die Another Day, right?
Perfect.
But I would like to have everybody being a participant. I don't want to be a speaker, and it's pretty boring to just speak. So please feel free and put up their questions and talk. I mean, it's a conversation. Let's not keep it a monologue, because that's what we are here for, to share experiences and to learn. Even I learn a lot of things from a lot of young people, to be very truthfully telling you, So please feel free. You ask questions, you talk, you do whatever you want to. It's not. Let's not keep it as a talk kind of a thing. Let's keep it as more of a case of where we are having a dialogue. We're trying to learn from each other.
Okay, sir, because I'd actually asked them to type the questions to.
No, they can. I would say that let them speak. I mean.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Okay, so you can interrupt and ask your questions.
Please feel free. Please feel free. I'll be very happy. So, okay, let's go ahead. So as I was talking about, this movie is all about diamonds, and where this North Korean guy, he buys diamonds and all these conflict diamonds and all that stuff. And so why all this thing? What is so relevant about it? Do you get the relevance? I hope we do. Right?
Absolutely.
So unfortunately, quote unquote, the man is still under investigation, but he has been accused of something like this. And he has committed something major, and that is called as a fraud. What he has done is he has actually, he's laundered money. He's smuggled money out of the system. He's used it. So he's been accused of that, and currently he's under investigation. So by the way, just before we start, anything, what is the context behind all this thing? What is it? What is money laundering? Why is it happening? So it's actually, it involves highly illegal amount of money that is going out of the system. Now, why do we say illegal money? Now, please try and understand. Here comes very fundamental aspect of solving any business problem. Please try and understand the business. So please, all of us must be very clear in our mind that we are trying to solve a business problem. We are not trying to solve an artificial intelligence or a technology problem. We are trying to help. We are trying to enable the system. So understanding the problem is very important. So that's why I wanted to bring up this point of what is money laundering. It's a lot of money that is being moved around the world, and illegitimate money. So if I'm earning money, I have a right to earn money in any free society, but I have to give my taxes. And if I don't give my taxes and I earn a large amount of money and move the money from one place to another, that is wrong. That is something wrong. Now, there are ways and means that these monies are being moved around. So one of the ways is, we go to these, I'm sure we must have heard about something called as, offshore accounts, all these things. Shell companies, very famous words, So we have these little islands in the three, Cayman Islands, Panama, Bahamas, Singapore, Bahrain, Hong Kong. Now these are countries which have got a very liberal, I would say, laws, taxation laws. So they're not concerned about from where you're getting your money. But in other countries, they ask you from where did you earn your money. Here, they don't ask you from where did you get the money. They say, okay, you got it, that's it, end of the story. You put it in my bank and you go away. Will be safe. Now, that's a kind of an offshoring center. So what they do is, how they launder money is one of the ways, So what they do, they'll buy high-end, stuff like cars and yachts and all that stuff. Then they'll also move the money from one bank to another. Another way is putting it in offshore accounts. Another way is illegitimate businesses. So these are the ways in which money is being laundered. But what is happening when what basically you're trying to do is you're placing your money and you're layering it up. You're putting up into different layers of money. So you see what is happening. You're doing a wire transfer in different accounts, as you can clearly see in the point 2, layering. So wire transfer is taking place between different accounts. Now, another one is integration. So, okay, I've got the money. Say I moved money from A country to B country. Very good. Now what do I do with it? I can't sit on it just for the heck of it. I will start investing in local businesses. Now that is wrong because I have not paid my taxes. But who does it? Now, can we see some of our people that we come across in our daily lives? Do we see some of them? My favorite is the con artist. I really like this guy. Now, having said that, let's get back to some basics of fundamentals of, what is happening in the world. How are they doing it? How do you, okay, you have a problem statement of solving an anti-money laundering. So you're working for a bank and the bank manager or somebody senior comes up to you and says, I've got a problem of anti-money laundering. Can you please solve it? Now that is a problem statement you have. So what do you have? You have to do a lot of data collection. So basically what you're doing is you're looking at a data swamp. Now, swamp, as we know, is not a very clean, I would say lake. So something like that. You have a lot of data that you have put in, but you're not realizing what the value of the data is. How do you organize that data? So we don't have an idea on that. So what we do is we try and organize our data. So what we do is we need to have a very highly interactive visualization appeal. How do we organize our data? Why do we need it? Obviously, we need to have an advanced analytic systems. Now, if you want to do any kind of a AI-based system, if you want to build a machine learning-based system, you need to have a very important step that we undergo. A very fundamental step that we undergo is collection of data. So we'll have to find out what are the sources of data. So why do we use social media in today's world? That's very important. As Dr. Sarabjit just said before the beginning, social analytics has become a very important part because it gives you an indication of what you are doing. So let me give you an example. Now, I am an individual and I am saying that I'm making, say, only a very small amount of money. But if you go on my social websites, you can see me buying fancy cars, fancy watches. You see my wife is buying very fancy clothes and accessories. A person who's having a very small amount of money, how he or she can do it? It's very surprising, isn't it? So what you do is actually, and that is, by the way, this is a very, very truthful, it is actually happening because in my previous organization and NSCS, National Security Council Secretariat, I also worked on this anti-money laundering part. So we did look at a lot of data from a lot of social media accounts, and it gives you an indication of the kind of person you are. What are you trying to do? But as you can clearly see, if you go to any social media website, it's very, very unorganized. So everybody's talking, everybody's commenting. There is a lot of fun. There's a lot of negative statements which are intending to positive direction. So how do you do it? How do you collect your information? So you have this complete swamp that is there. You have internal data, you have external data, you have social media data, third-party data. So third-party data can be like, your credit card history, your banking accounts, your insurance becomes very important, by the way. I mean, again, let me give you an example. I am a man who's earning a very small paltry amount of money, but I have an insurance cover of, say, very large amount, say 100 crores. How is that possible? Even a 10% premium on 100 crores is 10 crores. A man who's earning a small amount of money is giving 10 crores as a premium. Interesting, isn't it? So agencies and companies that are working in this field, they do use these kind of social information from third parties, and they do bring in all these information together, and then they put it up together. And they finally organize it. So it becomes a very organized way. So this is a kind of a standard framework, you know. So what we're looking at is you have the tools, the maintenance, the data lineage, analytics you're doing, or you're doing all your operations, you're building up a data dictionaries, everything you're doing. But you look at the bottom part. Now that's a very large, you know, this diagram has a very big meaning, you know. If you observe very closely, the bottom is very, very large compared to the top. Why? Because the stronger, I mean, the larger the bottom, more stable is the top. What do I mean to say by this is that that if you observe very closely, that the bottom part is actually having something, a large system. Now you have your analytics out there. You have your regulatory information. Now, why do we need a regulatory information? Because all these things are being driven by regulations. You have your business process supports, your data onboarding. That means you're pulling data from multiple sources. When you have all these things in place, then only you can do your analytics. So analytics is the final goal that we are trying to achieve. We are trying to solve a problem based on analytics. But before that, there is a large set of steps that we have to undergo. We have to pull up information from multiple sources. We have to organize ourselves. We have to form a look at the regulatory mechanisms, what is happening, how do we bring data. Let's put it up this way. I want to look at data from all the social media accounts on the earth. Is it possible? No, it's not. It's a very difficult task. So I have to be very choosy. How do I pull up my relevant piece of information? So this is the kind of questions. Now, let me put it up this way. You are not questioning anybody when you're doing a data analytics problem. You're actually questioning yourself. It's a question that you're putting up to yourself. So if I'm trying to look at all the social media profiles, I'm questioning to myself, can I pull up the data for all the people on the earth? I would love to do that, to have a very good anti-money laundering system. But can I do it? I mean, no, it's not possible. So I'm actually questioning myself. Then let's look at another one, regulatory integration. What kind of regulatory integrations do we have? So every country has something around anti-money laundering. Now, some of us must have heard about the word called as FATF. Have we? It's a basically a regulatory mechanism that has been set up, and it talks about 28 rules that have to be followed by every country. So based on the rules and regulations they're following, they're put into various buckets. So you have the white bucket, you have the gray bucket, and you have the black bucket. So based on the buckets where you're pushed, your other parameters are defined. So how much money will be lended to which country, which organizations can trade with them, which companies can trade with them. So all these things become very important for the countries as well. So it's a country level, organization level thing, you know. Now, having said that, let's look at, I'll just go through a case study. Let's take this as a case study, you know. So how do I prevent a fraud that is happening at the very application stage? You know, let's take this case of the person who's trying to buy a insurance. So now I am an insurance firm, and I am trying to find out that how do I find out whether this person is right, wrong, his claim is right, he's trying to surrender a claim, is the correct person or not correct person, have they followed the information that is required. So what we do is we look at his claim and surrender. So you have the person where he's putting up his details, you're validating. How do you validate? Question is that, you know. So companies, by the way, are looking at these pieces of information. So they do look at your social media profiles. So I'm sure some of us must have heard, or all of us must have heard about the fact that when we go to some of the countries' embassies or high commissions for their visa applications, they do ask for your social media profiles, right? So why do they do that? Because they are trying to find out what kind of a person you are. So even the companies are doing it. So they look at your social network, link, rules, all that stuff. Then they also have to look at the regulatory compliances. Now here, please try and understand one thing. The regulatory compliances are written in a very standard textual format. So this shall happen, that shall happen. Here, a lot of text mining based, NLP based applications are developed. It's a very great area to be working in today's world. The NLP based, text mining based areas. They pull up data, which is an unstructured data, and they combine the structured data which we have collected from the applicant, and we combine them together and we do a case management. So we're trying to look at the social network analytics. We're looking at the business rules have been followed or not, the text analytics that have been done or not, and then you generate an alert, whether it's a fraud or it's not a fraud accordingly. So this is one of the examples that we can look at. Now, a standard framework, this I really like this time because it very clearly brings out the kind of things we can do in our how it basically is happening, all these pieces of information, how they're collected, how they're managed, how they're put together. Now, if you observe very closely, now I'll also like to talk about some of the career developments thing that we can do in our day-to-day thing. So if I want to be a very good with say text analytics module, I can do it. It gives me a great idea and great opportunity. So what you have you have the data layer at the bottom, which talks about various kind of modules. You have the text analytics modules, you have the advanced analytics modules where you're trying to do all your customer analytics, accounts, transactions, all that stuff. You bring them together. Then you have the investigation layer where you're trying to put in a lot of mechanisms of regulation coming into picture, reporting engine layer, and finally the presentation layer. If you've collected all the pieces of information, you have done everything, but you are not aware of how do you present an idea. Now, presentation, I have always believed and I've always stressed, is very key. It's the key to decision maker, because a decision maker doesn't understand anything. He just wants to understand what happened to my problem statement. So presentation layer is a very important. So let me tell you one thing. Any one of us can take any one of these areas and specialize. It will give us a lot of career and advancements in any one of them. Now, if you just for the how do we do it? How do we build up an AML based system? So we actually started with the rules based engines. You put in all your rules. Your rules are, your information is flowing in, alerts are being generated, and subsequently you are able to match from the data sets whether the suspicious or not suspicious. So the biggest challenge I would say is that it's subjective and it's inconsistent. Why do we say that? Because it's a rule based. A rule has been made by me. I can change the rule. And it's a time consuming process because every time a new data flows in, it has to be matched with an existing rule. That rule has to be checked up. Then a dashboard has to be, then the data has to be matched. And then you finally find out what's suspicious or not suspicious. Then we go into a bit of a advanced machine learning based, feature based system where you have historical alerts. And you've also brought in your AML based solutioning now. And then again, you do your alerting, system we're creating. And finally, you have the deep learning or the algorithms where you are trying to actually, the data is looking and telling you a story. So let me give you an example or a perspective of what is the difference between analytics and machine learning / deep learning. So data analytics is, I am looking at the data and I am trying to find out what the data is saying. And machine learning or deep learning is just the other way around. It is the data that is trying to tell me something. I have to perceive that thing. So it's just the way of looking at things. Now, this is, you can use it as a kind of a high level architecture where we're looking at, a big data platform we're looking at, where you have these customer profiles you have created. So if you're one of the big companies, you have created a customer profile, you have a list of customer, and you have a scoring engines, credit scoring engines, your rating engines, so now the rating attributes can come in terms of your demographics, where do you stay, which location, which area, what kind of attributes you have. So I'm sure some of us must have heard that, credit card companies don't give money to certain kind of people. Now that's, unfortunately, that's the truth. Why do they not give money? Because they have a feeling that these people can be a trouble creators rather than a problem solvers for us. What is the likelihood of fraud that you're going to based on your past historical records? So that is why this word CIBIL rating that is coming. I'm sure some of us must have heard the word CIBIL, CIBIL, CIBIL rating. That actually indicates how much of what has been your payment history, your credit history, how you have behaved with the credit card companies, how frequently you have paid, what has been your defaults, what you have done. So you have all these engines. You also have a third party external data sources, as we talked about. You put it up in your customer and you build up your customer profiling, which actually feeds into your real-time engines. And it again feeds back to your data lake. And again, these data lakes are again updated. So when you say real-time in actionable intelligence, you're going to actually find out what your fraud analytics networks look like, or you say you're updating your risk appetite. So it was quite possible that at the initial stages, I found that 10% of my customers would create a fraud. But as my system started to learn more and more and more, based on the historical data, third-party data, other data that was collected, the system began to rectify itself and found no, the risk appetite is increasing. I'm becoming 20% risk appetite now. And then you have your visualization, which you're from your central data lake, you're pushing it into your visualization analytics layers. So that's kind of a flow that is a high level flow we can look at. So before we move on to the next one, can somebody, I mean, anybody has a question, please feel free, please.
Sir, with this fraud, it happens typically between organizations, right? From one bank to another bank and so on, that money is getting transferred. So how can we get access to all that data? I mean, obviously at a government level, there are ways, I guess, to connect
Yes.
with that. But is it possible to really get a full picture of the money laundering that takes place?
Yes, it does have a picture, because what is happening in today's world is that a lot of banks have started to tie up among themselves.
Ah,
So you see this concept of CIBIL rating that has come into picture.
right.
So that is being shared by one and all.
Hmm.
Now the reason why it is being shared by one and all is because the fact that this actually creates a kind of a mechanism between various companies, that how are my people behaving? Can you please tell them? Can you please tell me? So that is
Right.
one of the ways of way people have started to find out what is happening among the companies.
I see. Okay. Thank
So,
you, sir.
and also at the government level, as you correctly pointed out, governments do collect these pieces of information, and they have a right to do it, because that's how the regulatory mechanism works.
Hmm.
So that's how things are working out. They are actually working together among themselves.
So, because I mean, a few years ago, when the Nirav Modi and all of these cases were coming out, there were some forensic accountants that were very interested in looking at the use of AI
Hmm.
to identify. Because right now the process is that these accountants, they're not very tech savvy. They go and are creating Excel spreadsheets and looking at transactions, and bank statements and all of that kind of stuff. And it's not only very laborious, but also fraught with errors, right? Because human errors will creep into the analysis. So what they're looking for is companies that are related parties, that transactions are taking place on, and so on, and those cross boundaries, right, or borders, like you were showing Nirav Modi's image there. For a forensic accounting company, this is difficult to achieve, right? Because there is very siloed data. So do you think this is really only possible at a kind of government level to do these kinds of applications?
No, I mean, so there are companies I know of, some consulting firms in particular. They have started to build these kind of platforms. As you correctly pointed out earlier, it was a very silo-based approach that they had. So they had a silo-based approach, but now they have also realized that this cannot be a silo-based approach. They have also started to build up these kind of platforms. I was associated with one of the organizations. I was consulting for one of them, where they were trying to build up this, KYC for their high-end customers across the world. So there they wanted to look at information from internet. So, so it's like this, the KYC, know your customer, for people like us, how much can they do? I will give my Aadhaar card, I will give my, perhaps driving license, I'll give whatever I have, right? But for a person who's very powerful in an organization or in a country, he will not be moving money using his name or his wife's name. He will be doing it in some other people's name. So these FATF, by the way, has a rule, and so does the European Union Anti-Money Laundering Act. They have a rule as far as the KYC, know your customer, is concerned. You not only have to look at an individual, but also his children, his what his children are doing, what his family members are doing, who his friends are, all these things. You have to collect all these pieces of information together, and you have to
Right.
put them up together to do a KYC. So companies have started to build these kind of
Uh-huh.
profiles.
Sure.
So they are pushing in, and then you have some of the other third party like LexisNexis is one of the very famous ones. They have a lot of database around it. So
Right.
they are pushing in a lot of data from third parties, and they've started to do it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Abhishek, you had raised your hand. Was there a question?
Yes, hello, sir. I have two questions. One is just like you mentioned that they can do profiling and they can do KYC. So one thing I was wondering is that the government can do network analysis and see how the money is being spent, because however they pull out money from the system, ultimately they'll spend it somewhere. They'll buy a yacht, they'll buy some iPhones, some luxury things, whatever in every like say furniture or something, whatever they do. If there we are able to track that how high value assets are being bought and do a network analysis, because if I have money, ultimately I'll put it in hands of someone I trust. That would be family members maybe. So I think that is one thing. And second question I had was that if we have digital currency, and better if we have an international digital currency, cryptocurrency or something, instead of dollar or gold, then it will be easier to track how even governments are moving the money or how huge quantities are being moved. Because I think these even Swiss banks or the islands that you were showing, I think they also accept payments in dollars only. They don't accept all currencies maybe. So if we have a digital currency, can it help in tracking down these frauds or money laundering acts?
Okay, so Abhishek Lomash, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Hearing voice, right? I could get you. How are you doing, by the way, Abhishek?
Good, sir. I'm doing very well.
Good. Nice to hear that. So, Abhishek, you have got 2 points. One is looking at this. Can the countries look at the social media platforms, and can they look at your high value transactions and all that stuff, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So, so let me put it this way. I'm sure you must be filing your taxes by now.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
My father is doing it.
Whatever it is. I mean, you have a PAN card, right? So if you have a
Yes.
PAN card, I'm sure if I remember correctly, you did get one when we were there together. So when you have a PAN card, your transactions are being linked, because every time you do a transaction, your PAN card is linked, your bank card is linked to a bank account, your PAN card is linked to everything, right? So any kind of a transaction that you do at the end of the year, when you're doing a high value, when you file your taxes, you will have to show what kind of a high value transactions that you have done. You can hide it if you want to hide it, no problems. There's just no problem. You want to hide it, go ahead. But trust me, the government has enough sources. And by the way, this is not only for our government, it is across the world, by the way. So let's not blame anybody. So it's across the world, governments have enough sources and they look at them. That, say, as I told you in one of the earlier examples, this case, when I was talking about this one, I am a person who has got a very small amount of paltry amount of earning, but I'm buying a premium, but I'm paying a premium of 10 crores for my insurance. Now, isn't that very funny? So governments do look at the other sources of income and other sources of spending as well. So if I buy a yacht, and as a middle class person, I'm buying a yacht that is $10 million worth, there is going to be a red flag that is going to be raised, by the way. And they do look at that spending part of the game. That is answering to your first part of the game. Second part, you talked about the cryptocurrencies and other things. So let me give you an example. Now, cryptocurrency is a new world that has emerged altogether. And there is a lot of debate that is going on across the governments and the regulatory mechanisms of the governments, that is it legal, is it not legal? So there are certain countries that have allowed legal. Some countries have said no, not legal. So let me give you a very classic example in today's context. Let's take the case of China. Now, a very interesting country in today's world. Now, what has happened is China has launched its own cryptocurrency. But it has said that cryptocurrency will not be used within the system. It can be used outside. So if you just go over the internet, you can find these pieces of information, how China has started to use the cryptocurrency. By the way, around 80% of the world's transaction takes place in dollars. It still takes place in dollars. And after having so many regulatory mechanisms and so many checks and balances, yet we are having a system where people are able to move money, ill-gotten wealth, from one place to another. So one really wonders what is going to happen in cryptocurrency. So that is also a regulatory mechanism thing that, and this is one of the reasons, one of the multiple reasons, this is also one of the reasons why the governments are very reluctant at this time period to figure out or to use cryptocurrency as a means of transactional means. Plus it is not backed by any asset. So there are multiple things that are happening. So cryptocurrency is still in a very, very gray zone. Should it come into the white zone or should it remain in the gray? That is a lot of regulatory banks, central banks across the world, they are also contemplating and they are also debating around it. So I hope I'm able to answer some of your questions, Abhishek.
Yes, sir.
So anything else on anti-money laundering, exciting or not exciting? I mean, I find it very exciting, frankly speaking, because it gives me a feeling of James Bond, you know.
So, sir, with these cryptocurrencies, I mean, Abhishek was making the point that it may be easier to track, but in fact, my understanding is that it's more difficult to track, right? Because
Exactly.
actually there's no central authority and no government has access to any of that information.
Exactly.
So
you're quite correct on that point.
Wallet ownership is not really kind of understood, right?
Right. I mean, and moreover, as you are aware of it, sir, that the fact that these are not backed by any asset. So I can keep on, it's only, I'm churning out numbers, right?
Right.
Churning out numbers doesn't make sense. I mean, how much do I print is not based on some facts and figures on ground. It's just based on some fictitious number, some algorithmic thing that, although I'm sounding very anti-technology person, but then see, technology also runs on certain facts and figures of life. You also need money to run the show, right? So, I mean, I can keep on printing money, but then we all know if you keep on printing money, what happens? The value of the currency will only go down at a time period, and it'll be like, it's like, you know, if I get, everybody keeps on getting the money in their pocket, then the value of the money goes down. So I will also go and buy a car, and so will everybody else. So you're quite correct out there. And that's why that gray mechanism is existing. And that's why that gray shade is existing. And countries and regulatory banks are talking about it, whether we should bring them into a formal systems or not. In fact, to be very frank with you, sir, I'll be very truthful telling you that as far as India is concerned, India had initially rejected the idea of cryptocurrency. So RBI had mandated it very clearly, and former finance minister Arun Jaitley had said that we are not going to use cryptocurrencies. But in a very recent Supreme Court ruling, Supreme Court of India has ruled that why not allow cryptocurrencies? This has come out in the month of January, if I'm not mistaken. Very recently, Supreme Court of India has come out.
Yeah. And in fact, I think one of the reasons also is that a lot of activity in the dark web, which of course is a topic for a different webinar from you, I'm sure. But, you know, a lot of transactions, terrorist, money is all kind of in crypto, right? And being transferred so that it's not trackable.
Exactly. That's quite correct out there. No? In fact, even again, I will go back to my previous avatar where I was there. You know, and we did a lot of dark web and deep web tracking, a lot of stuff.
I can imagine.
And we found that it does happen, and things only get more and more murkier. One really is not aware of the fact that what is happening on ground.
Right.
Which is actually a kind of a, I would say, a problem for the governments. I mean, I hope I want to appreciate this. See, this is a system that we all have built. It's not been built by one person, one party, or anybody. It's been built by us, the people. Right? So why would we like to break it down completely and build up a new structure? Better is that we try and make changes within the organizations, within the systems.
Right.
So anyone else on anti-money laundering, trade-based money laundering? These are, by the way, these are very exciting times to be working in, and these are very great areas to work in. So my suggestion would be that, I mean, whenever you're talking to companies, whenever you're talking to anybody, if you can showcase to people that you have the capability to understand these subjects, it actually brings them, and if you are a good technology person and you have a deep understanding on anti-money laundering, fraud analytics is one of the hottest careers at this time period, by the way. It is one of the biggest in demand.
A question that's been typed here by Dibjot Kaur is, hi sir, but this data, is this data available for learners to work on it? So what are the problems?
Yes, there are some. Yes, there are some companies do allow these freewares, but it's not a very large database set. You will get some sample data. I can share that with you guys.
Okay, great.
I'll share it down. Yes, please.
Hello, sir. Abhinav this side. In this slide, you have mentioned this real-time intelligent actions on the customer profiles.
Yes.
Would you mind giving us a brief introduction of what are those intelligent actions? I mean, I'm not clearly understanding from these points.
Okay.
Can you give a like?
You're talking about this one, right? If I'm not mistaken, the one where the arrow is pointing, right? Real-time intelligent action.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. So how do you understand your customer in real time? Let me put it this way. So let me give an example. Perhaps you'll be able to appreciate this. Now, a lot of these top high-flying CEOs of the companies, they in the past have got calls from a lot of fraudsters and a lot of people with a malicious background saying that you please you please pay up X amount of large sum of money because otherwise I'll expose you in this manner. So at the initial stages, people were confused. How did they come to know that I am having a capability to pay a large sum of money? Then after investigation, it was found that invariably or unknowingly, they had put up their photographs of holidays with their wives, or their wives had put up their holidays photographs on their social media platforms. So if I am a person who is having an exotic holiday in an exotic island or an exotic Alps, at a very high expensive hotel, obviously I'm not a small person. So these criminals look at it in these kind of information. Similarly, when you're building up a system of this nature, you can look at a person's profile. So you can run these algorithms and you can run algorithms and you can pull data 24/7. So you can have a set of identified benchmarks, either individuals' profiles or certain keywords based on which you can pull information from your social media platforms on a real-time or a near real-time system. So the information will be pulled as long as I put it up. If I don't say anything about myself, nobody ever will come to know about me. So here comes a very important aspect that we worked on, and that was about your behavior on social media. We will have another session sometime in future where we'll talk about social media analytics and how it is being happening and why it is becoming a very important part in today's world. How it is becoming a very important part. So if you put up a piece of information on your social media platform, it can be pulled. And it's completely unstructured data. Now I'll get into a bit more technicalities. Completely unstructured data, make it structured. What do? You apply all kind of NLP problem-based solutions. So it's freely available. You can just go to the internet and you can find all those algorithms and you can manipulate it as per your requirements and you can get it done. So the only question is how much data will you pull? Where will you store that data? How much data will you store it at a historical level? That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Sir?
Yeah.
Sir, actually, I was wondering, most of the frauds which happen, they happen at a higher class of society. So how you analyze the middle class society and by their social media trends, you try to capture where the money is being laundered. For example, Nirav Modi or Chanda Kochar, they work in banks and they have declared so many companies as NPA, which actually weren't, or they were some kind of frauds. So how would you justify the fact that middle class people were laundering the money and they were trying to buy something luxurious, whereas the money was actually laundered by the higher class of people?
Okay, so let me put it this way. A person who has access to power and money has a higher probability of committing a crime. It's a very well-known social theory factor.
Yes.
Right? Now, this has got nothing to do with analytics, but you need to understand this theory because when you're trying to do something like this kind of a work, you have to understand a lot of other factors. So that is why I said, you have to learn a lot of business angles of this solution. Okay. Now, this has got nothing to do with analytics or artificial intelligence, but when you're trying to solve, you have to know these theories. Coming back to your question of people who are more powerful and who have got more access to money, Are they more prone to corruption, or the ones who don't have, are they less prone to corruption? Now, corruption has got nothing to do with access to power or money. Let me put it this way. It is your own moral judgments that are there. At the end of the day, you can build the best of the prisms, you can build the best of the regulatory mechanisms, but if your society, if we as individuals are corrupt, nothing can prevent the society to go down the drain. It is entirely your prerogative. You said that middle class can do corruption. Yes, I can also do corruption. We also do corruption. By not paying our taxes completely, it's a kind of a criminal act that we're doing. By bribing somebody, we are doing a criminal act. So we are only feeding ill-gotten wealth into somebody's hands. As far as some powerful people you have named, yes, they have been accused. They are not yet convicted. Let's put it this way. They have been accused of corruption, under investigation. Why did they do it? Because they had access to money and they were powerful. That is why when we sometime back, we were discussing about KYC for very powerful people. That is one of the reasons why. And this is, by the way, legal implication. This is by law. FATF and EU Anti-Money Laundering Acts and US Patriot Act, they do have these points. You will have to bring out your KYC in a much more detailed manner. So they have defined the kind of people you need to be, what kind of position you're holding, what is the level you are at with. So they have defined it at level 1 to level 5. You know, what kind of organization, everything has been really clearly defined. I mean, if you're interested in working in this anti-money laundering fraud analytics area, you should read that act. It's very, very interesting area to work in. So should we go ahead, sir?
So there's another question, if you don't mind.
No, please. I mean, I can understand the excitement from a lot of young people who are wanting to work in this area. And I appreciate that point. Please feel free.
So Srinivasa, you have your hand raised. Is there a question?
Yes. Actually, I want to share one of my experience which I had regarding with anti-money laundering.
Yes.
Yes, I worked in a bank.
Okay.
In a sales department where I'll be dealing with some of my clients. We will be getting some mails from data analytics department from the bank. What is the mail will be, if they find for each and every transaction, the data analytics will be running and it will be sending a mail. These are the suspicious transactions which we found. You inquire with your client what are such transactions, and there will be a bunch of some 10 to 15 questions which we have to clarify with the client and we have to submit the details.
Right.
This is what I have done for many clients.
Right.
There have been some, if it is suspicious transaction, we'll be blocking the account.
Okay.
This is the things we will be doing in the banking way I have done in the banking earlier.
Right.
This is what the data analytics regarding with the AML, the bots will be automatically running, right?
So one of the things that you can easily do is that you, as you said correctly, as you said in your statement, that you're getting emails from your data analytics team, right?
Yes.
What you can do, it's basically what is an email? If you look at it in terms of structured and unstructured data, it's an unstructured data, right? So you can build up a system where you completely collect these pieces of emails that you keep on getting. Based on the emails, you can build up your unstructured data can be converted into a structured data. Based on the structured data, you can create rules around it, and then subsequently triggers can be related and can be triggers can be generated that this is a kind of fraud that is going to take place, or this is a probability of fraud might take place, which will actually help a lot of eliminate a manual process and will free the manpower from doing the manual process and perhaps give them more time to do analysis.
Great, thank you, sir. Yes, please carry on. Thank you for your question, Srinivas Raghavan.
Yes.
So I would just like to carry it forward, and since we're talking about money laundering and all this thing, we're looking at the banking system, right? Now, what is happening in today's banking system is that you see this entire thing. how is it learning? So you have applied AI in the middle, and you have the machine learning and your rule-based system based on which you are doing your cognitive searches, NLP-based things, where you're doing your KYC screening, as we talked about, fraud, cyber security, credit scoring, algorithmic trading. Now, um, I'm sure some of us must have heard about it, sentiment analysis. So actually this is happening, and this is happening in today's world. The banks are using it. Particularly the young banks that have come out, the transaction payment modes of online or mobile transaction companies have started to use this. So you have companies like Paytm and all these things, they have started to apply all these things. The decision making systems are based on their rule based or machine learning based, where technology is becoming an enabler for them, and applications are more applications are being developed based on these natural language processing applications. But how do we bring efficiency? Actually, you look at, so your reporting compliance improves with your based on your NLP based, your cognitive searches increases, your predictive analytics improves, your operational safety, and the benefits that you get is operational safety, efficiency. Similarly, for a client, which is the most important thing, when you say I'm a person who's going to a bank and I'm got to fill up 20 forms in order to open a bank. Even in today's world, when you go to a bank, you have to fill up at least 3 to 4 forms that you have to put up your signatures 3 to 4 different places. Now just imagine you walk into a bank, all you do is you give your identity card, he scans it, he tells you to sign at one place, and you come out of the bank. Well, we have seen some of these advertisements that have been coming around in the on the television sets, where a person is just saying, okay, I mean, he's using his identity card and he's just saying, I'm taking a photograph and your bank account is opened. So that has already started to happen. So client journey has become very important. So for a banking system, client satisfaction is the primary. Now, we often come across some cases where in our daily lives, we have not had a very good interaction with certain banks, but we have had very good interactions with certain other banks. Reason being, ultimately, it's about client satisfaction. So for a banking system, client journey, client satisfaction is the primary. Marketing and sales is again driven. Now, if I know that which areas that I need to target, which per people I need to target. So say if I have the demographic of a area that I've been assigned, and I know what are the kind of potential clients I can be targeting. If I have this piece of information, my client satisfaction will improve, because perhaps I was targeting a person who was actually looking towards me, but we were not able to communicate properly because A, I was not able to go to them, or B, I did not have the information about that person concerned. So now, based on his profile that I have at my hand, I can do a better sales and marketing. KYC, as we talked about, data protection has become another important area. So if you look at this diagram, what does it talk about? It talks about payments, ticketing, targeted advertisement. Now some of us keep on getting very targeted advertisement. Now let me give you an example. Uh, it's about food. Unfortunately, the food deliveries in today's world, in the world that we are living in for last 3 to 4 months, food deliveries are a bit of a issue. But we still keep on getting targeted advertisements. Please come to this food chain, we will give you safe food. How did they find out? Because they were able to figure out what kind of a profile that I have in my thing. So the banks are also using it based on my transactional records, based on the kind of behavior that I'm showing, how many times I'm transacting, what am I doing with my accounts. They're able to figure out what my buying capacity and purchasing capacity is, and based on that, they're doing the targeted advertisement. So this has become a very important thing. Similarly, phones have become, and internet has become a very important. Communication is very important. Also, one of the ways of communication has become the social media. So if you look at the size of the square, these circles, it indicates the kind of easily communication that is happening. Similarly, your home security or your furnishings, whether you'll buy a home or not, whether you'll buy furnishings, if you'll buy the home, then will you be buying your furnishings or not? That kind of a thing is becoming very common in today's world. So how does a bank actually come to know that I am going to buy a house, and if I buy a house, what kind of house I may buy? I mean, why don't I get a call that why don't you buy a bungalow that is worth a huge amount? Because the bank knows very well how much my paying capacity is. So they're aware of all these pieces of information, and they're already using it. And this piece of information is being passed on. Now, here I would like to give a bit of a pause, and I would like to talk something very important that has come into picture, and that is about data protection. Now, data protection earlier was a very gray area. You could buy and sell data. Now, with the new laws coming into picture, I mean, some of us must have heard about GDPR, Global Data Protection Regime, or the data protection bill that is being tabled in the parliament. It talks about protecting the customer's data and not sharing it to another third party without the consent of the customer. So this has become a very important. So a lot of changes will be coming into picture as we go out in future. So that is one area that we should all be concerned about. So if when we are dealing with data, because we are data scientists, we are data analysts, we are aspiring to be artificial intelligence people, we should be very careful about one very important piece of information, and that is data. So I would request one and all not to be very casual, be very careful, because it has a very large legal ramifications, and particularly as we grow up in our career, we will be asked to very carefully analyze this part. Now, why is the technology being driven? What are the business factors? You know, one of the big things is like the need to extend automation in intelligent processes and to stay competitive on profitability. That's one big very area, because business wants to be profitable. How do I give a solution to a business to ensure that it remains profitable, it is able to generate revenues as early as possible, stay ahead of its competitors? So we as technology people, we have to ensure that a business gains a lot of value out of it. We are trying to, as I said at the beginning, we are trying to solve a business problem. We are trying to make sure that the business grows. Now, one important thing that we often tend to make mistake is we tend to think that I am important because I am bringing in technology. I am as important as the business is. It's a team game. The business is the key. If the business wins, I win. If the business does not win, I don't win. So it's not us versus them. We tend to have this feeling it is, oh, they're the business side and we are the technology side. No, we are not that way. In today's world of artificial intelligence, data analytics, we all have to be very deeply ingrained into the business. We have to understand what the requirements are. I cannot be working in a silo, as Dr. Sarabjot was saying some time ago, that earlier the companies used to work in that silo mode where they were doing forensic analytics. Now even they have realized that just working in silos got to do nothing. I mean, I can have the best of the business knowledge, but because information is flowing in so many forms and from so many places, how do I collect information? How do I make a better analytical results out of it? I will be able to do it only when I have a right solution. That means if I'm the business side, I have to sit down with the technology side, and I'm the technology side, I'll have to sit down with the business side, understand his pain points, understand his requirements and gatherings, and then put it up in an organized form so that all of us win at the end of the day. It's all about winning. It's all about profitability in the right manner. That is the key to driving any business, any AI based adoption solution that we are looking at. So site, where you're looking at behavioral profiles. So why do these companies put up these questions? Were you satisfied? Were you not satisfied? How satisfied were you? How was the quality of this? How was the quality of service? What happened when you walked into the bank? So you can all find that piece. You can say, if you can do it for one person, you can do it for 100 people, you can do it for 50, 100 people, you can do it for X number of people. You can divide it up into your individual branches. You can go down to your profiles, who was handling it, what was the performance of the person who was handling it. You can do every little thing out there, and you can get all the details out there. So it's there, you can just have to check it out. Now, as we talked about, AI, smart contracts, blockchains, RPAs, these are all interlinked. There's nothing individual blocks out there. They're all interlinked to each other. Everybody's trying to talk to each other. Look at this case of HR, RPA. It's between RPA and AI. What can HR do? So you have the RPAs, robotic process automations, where you're pulling in information and you're trying to do a lot of NLP based problem solving. How does it help the HR? Because if the HR is able to figure out that my employee is getting dissatisfied, because retaining employees is a big challenge that every organization is feeling. So if you can do an excellent piece of work out there as a technology person, if you can help the HR to find out what kind of a source you're looking at, all these things will help the banking systems or any of these systems that we are looking at. Now, a bit of a technical side. Let's look at this diagram. So if I was to look at it from the historical data perspective, now this star is actually our client. So you see, I've organized my data. I've got red and I've got greens and I've got yellows and a bit of a orange as well. So okay, this is my, I did a statistical analysis and I got it. And now, how would a traditional statistician see? He would see it in different forms. If you can clearly see this thing, even if you ignore this piece of, I would say the diagram, if you look at it, you can clearly see that, okay, there is a green part, which is at the bottom, and there's a red part that is at the top. But if you apply a bit more of a, I would say, this is a classification problem where you're just doing a clustering, or rather clustering problem, then you can clearly see that your asterisk, that your client is lying in the green zone primarily. You can clearly see this. What is happening is that all the people around, or all the kind of similar kind of customers around this kind of a profile would be giving you a kind of a green kind of a feeling. What actually we're trying to do out here is we are just trying to apply a clustering problem based on for our clients. That is it. Nothing big deal. But it actually requires a lot of understanding of the data. You have to have a very good, deep understanding of the business problem before you can even apply a clustering. So applying clustering problems, classification problems is not the real challenge. Understanding the problem statement is the real challenge. Now, this is how do you push data? When it's about talks about data management systems, information storage. So you connect it from the real-time data, how you ingest it from third parties devices, and you do all your data sparsing, filtering. You do your real-time analytics. You bring in your large data value from the cache. Storing of information is very important. So as a data scientist, you will be asked question: how much data are you going to store? You want to store the entire historical data, but is it feasible to store the entire historical data? That's a judicious question that you have to take at the time period in life. So it'll be very, very, you're doing a fine balancing act between a lot of stuff. Now, this is something you can, let's take this case of let's take this thing in a case of a banking system. So I have my ATM card, which is actually in the physical world, right? I'm inserting my ATM card, which is actually into an ATM, which is doing some censoring. Based on that, some data analytics is happening. That is, it is telling my bank that this person has inserted a system. Please tell the person what exactly is bank account system. So it is looking in the ontology, it is doing an association with me, and then it is making a decision. And then finally an adoption or an action is taking place. I am being given a money back. So again, I'm coming back to the physical world. Now, all this is happening while the service evaluation layer at the top is giving you service provisioning, and you have the human demand that is being driven. Again, the social world. So this world of social, cyber, and physical have merged together in today's world. So this is a very, you can take it in any form, whether it's for banking industry, whether it is for insurance industry, even it's for the anti-money laundering industry, what we were talking about, the physical world movement of the money. Individual is there, he's moving the money into the cyber world, through the cyber world, and he's bringing it into the social world. That is, he's trying to buy something, he's trying to do some activity, he's trying to move money to buy a yacht or fulfill his social demands. So this entire cognitive framework can be used to find out what exactly is happening at the decision-making levels. Now, very important part. All of us want to be a scientist, all of us want to be an engineer, but how do we become one? So I hope that this kind of this diagram will help us all understand what is the kind of path that we need to take. Because in any banking system, one of the big demands is I want an artificial intelligence engineer or a data scientist. But if I'm an aspiring person, what do I need to do in order to become one? How do I become an individual who can do? So your starting point is basics of mathematics. You should be very good with your game of probability, I would say. You should have a very good understanding. Please remember one thing, that this entire data science is about probability. I am saying that there is a 90% probability today it might not rain. There's no 100% probability. So your statistical concept should be very strong. You should have a very good Python programming language, scripting base, all that thing, basic machine learning, and your ability to do your storytelling. So by this time, when you have covered the good machine learning engineer, but you want to aspire to become an AI or an ML engineer, so then in that case, you should also need to understand what are your big data tools kind of thing you need to do, or the kind of platforms that you need to have understanding on whether you're going to do it on Azure or AWS, what are the features, all these things, you need to have a good understanding. Similarly, if you want to become a good architect, engineer, what do you need to do? The kind of path that I thought would be very important for a lot of young aspiring professionals and whoever wants to become one. So, okay, this is another one. This is, I really like this kind of a representation. Why I really don't know, but Dr. Sarabjot is of the view, and he's known my view that I really like the word data visualization and storytelling through data. So I mean, what actually is this? I could have shared the same thing on a multiple form, but I really liked it because you see the power that is needed in order to become a data scientist. What kind of a specialization that you need to do, and how much power you need to give if you want to become a system administrator versus an analyst versus a data scientist. So this is very important. You need to have a very good storytelling, visualization. Your domain expertise should be very good. What kind of advanced, I see in case of a data scientist, this advanced analytics has to be very strong. But in case of a database administrator, if you're aspiring to be a database administrator, then perhaps your advanced analytics may not be that strong. But your database management skills should be very strong. So should your data analysis skills. And if you're trying to aspire to be a software engineer, then your programming skills have to be an extremely strong one. So this is a kind of a visualization that I really like. And how do you do it? What is the kind of expertise that you need to have in order to become a good aspiring or good data scientist or an artificial intelligence expert, software programmer, whatever you want to aspire to? What do you need to do in order to become one, in order to become a champion in the field of banking, finance, industry? What do you need to have a kind of a skills? So let's take a pause out here, and before we proceed for the final thing, let's talk about some of the questions that you or queries that if you have in mind.
Abhishek, would you like to pose the question you've typed here?
Yes, sir. So as you were mentioning about data security bill and how our data is being used and can be used for good. So I wanted to know that this China who's at present trying to change the narrative through memes and through videos that they're putting up on and circulating throughout the world to change narrative on anti-China narrative on COVID. And you see ISIS recruiting through social media. So majority of the recruitment is happening virtually. And then you see Brexit and US elections, how they were tampered, or people claim that they were tampered. So I wanted to know that having a data protection bill or data protection in place for our country, is it enough, or should we have social media networks built right from our country so that government can have a better control over it?
Okay, so there are two parts to this question, Abhishek. One is about data protection bill, and another one is about social network tools or / platforms that we need to build, right? So data protection, see, any rules is for the right set of people, okay? If I have a malicious intention, I will do whatever I want to do. So whenever businesses or business houses or any firm that is running a business has a business running, it has a lot of data that is collected over a time period. Question is, what can you use? How much can you use? How much can you share with others? What you can't share with others? That is what the data protection bill talks about very clearly. If you are going to keep the data, where you are going to keep the data. So certain data has to be kept within the physical premises of the country because it is considered an extremely critical piece of information. Certain piece of information can be kept in a cloud, and some pieces can go outside the country because they're not that critical. That is what the data protection bill talks about. So it talks about your responsibilities, and it also talks about your obligations as far as the legal affairs are concerned. Coming back to your point on social media. Now, social media platforms, do we need to build? Definitely we can build. We should build. What's wrong with not building? It's a business opportunity. It's a great business opportunity. If any one of us has that potential, we should go ahead and build up our own platforms. Question is, how much do you want to build? What is the thing that you want to do? So I was reading an article a few days back, and I saw that there's this guy. There's an app called as Mitron, MITRON, and this has been developed by one of the IIT Roorkee students. And in about a month, it has had 50 million downloads, and it is one of the fastest growing, and it's a rival to TikTok. one of the Chinese apps that has been there. So people are trying. I'm not denying about it. Should we have? Yes, we should have. It gives us a lot of business opportunities. It makes a lot of business opportunities for us as individuals. I mean, it's a great opportunity. I would not deny about it.
Niharika, you've got a question?
Yeah, so you showed a slide on the risk profiling of the users. So I had a very small question over
one?
there. This one, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not like we would have a lot of data which would be labeled in terms of, let's say, it's a risky user or it's a non-risky user. So I can understand that there would be a lot of direct metrics or features that you would have derived, and some would be a lot on the basis of behavioral metrics.
Yes.
So if you could briefly discuss upon what kind of behavioral analysis you did in such a huge data, just a summary of it would be super helpful.
So, okay, so let me ask you, let me put up a question to you. I mean, if you were to do the behavioral, just let me be your student, you be the teacher. Let's do this activity. If you were to be the teacher and I was to put up the same question to you about the behavior analysis, how would you do it? What kind of a behavior you think would be a good one? You know, what kind of features that we need to look at in order to to build up a good risk profile of a customer? What do you think I should be doing?
I mean, first would be to take as many direct features that I can and that I have with me. Something around the kind of transactions are there, the distance between the transactions, the time difference between the transactions.
Correct.
Any any if there is like a same kind of a pattern which is appearing, let's say something around the end of the month.
Right.
Or
so basically you're looking at the banking transaction that is there within the system itself, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's great one. That's a starting point. Now comes the question of I mean, we talked about the CIBIL rating scores and all that stuff some time back, right?
Yeah.
Now the CIBIL rating, what does it talk about? If I'm using a credit card, it only indicates how good or bad I have a relationship with my bank, right? How often do I make my payments? How often do I miss my payments? What is my how many times do I take an EMI on my payments? Or all these kind of things. Then it gives me a rating, CIBIL rating score, right?
Yeah.
That kind of an information is also being pushed.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Other actionable information that can come into picture is some of the banks, in case of a high rated individual, they do look at their income tax details. So they do ask you how many times have you filed your income tax as well, because they have linked your PAN number, which we have, with your bank account. So it also gives an indicator how often do you file your taxes. So if I'm saying that I have not filed my taxes, or say if I filed my taxes only 2 times in the last 5 years, it only indicates the kind of person I am, right? It indicates the kind of riskiness that I carry with me. So that means my income is very unstable in nature. So I'll probably land up in all the red zones. So if I'm holding a credit card, or if I am using a very high-end valuations game, if I'm buying a lot of shares, so that means it indicates that I have a very unstable earning systems. So because if I'm going below a level, I will not be filing my taxes. The government has given me an exemption. So these are the kind of pieces of information that you can draw from multiple sources in order to build up a risk profile of an individual.
Sir, is it right that the CIBIL score, I mean, there's a very small percentage of our country that would actually have a CIBIL score, right?
Yes, the reason why we have a very small percentage of CIBIL score, because again, that we all know the kind of credit card penetrations that we have. Right? And plus, let us also not forget one simple fact that, I mean, till 2015-16, about 65% of our people on the whole of this country were outside the banking system.
Right.
Which is not
they
a very
still
good
are, right? Other than on paper, they still are outside.
I mean, whatever said and done, at least
they all have an account.
Yeah, and everybody has an account. Now, question is how much do you use it? At least there is an account associated with me. And particularly with the DBT that is happening, the direct benefit transfer that is happening, I mean, money is flowing into the account, right? So transactions are happening.
Right.
Particularly, I will give you an example. If I don't know how many of us visit the Sarkari banks that we have, the PSUs banks that we have. If you go to these PSU banks at the starting of the month, you will notice a lot of large population of people not from very well-off economic strata in the banks. The reason that because children are coming in, they're saying कि मेरा school का fees आ गया है, मेरे को पैसा दे दो. Their parents are coming in कि मेरे बच्चे का fees आ गया है, ये आ गया है, वो आ गया है. A lot of old people. So things have moved into that direction. It will move. I'm not denying about it. I mean, are we in the best position? No, we are not. But let us all strive to be in the best of the positions.
But a lot of people don't believe in credit also, right? So, I mean, that's
Yes,
another reason why they don't have a credit rating. So,
by the way, I do not believe in using credit card, to be very truthfully telling you. I mean, I'm not a very
Western bimari.
Sorry?
Western bimari.
No, I mean, it's like this. It's not a Western bimari. It's like this, जितनी चादर होती है उतनी पैर फैलानी चाहिए.
But I mean, there are these companies that are now using social media data, right? And behavior on social media to kind of come up with an alternative credit rating to be able to give money to those that don't have a credit rating. So, I mean, what kind of behavioral, stuff can be collected there?
Okay. So one of the things that they've started to do is a lot of companies, a lot of individuals, they are basically, they still avoid the banking transaction systems. Okay. But what happens is, I mean, they basically belong to an older generation, if you observe very closely. But the younger lot, they may not be having access to money very easily, but they have access to social media profiles. So banks have started to do that, although right now it's a very gray area whether you can use it, whether you can't use it, kind of a thing. So what they're doing is they're potentially targeting those individuals who have money, and they're trying to push the products to them. So there is an activity that is already started to take place in that direction. It's not that it's been completely been ignored or it's been completely been accepted. It's a kind of a 50-50 game that is being played around. So, but again, the question comes into picture is, if I'm trying to sell something, I need to know my demographic profile of my people, right? So they are getting to that game. So banks are using it. They're looking at the social media analytics teams are looking at it, and they're pushing this piece of information to the sales and marketing people that this is the kind of potential person who may be of use to you. So they are doing it. It's not that it's not happening. And this has started to happen more in case of insurance companies. I mean, this is very surprising, considering the fact that banking industry has been more advanced compared to insurance as far as the adoption of technology is concerned. But in case of social media profiling, I would say insurance companies have been more advanced.
Right. Interesting. Sir, I do realize we are being very greedy. We are a very greedy organization. When somebody is talking, we use them for much longer than they commit to. So,
really frankly speaking, there's nothing wrong in being
questions will carry on. If you want to carry on with your content also, I do realize we are almost 25 minutes over right now. Okay. Please carry on.
So I'll just finish up in the next 5 minutes, and we can open up for more of questions.
Lovely.
So blockchains, I'm sure all of us must have heard about it. What is it? How do you do your transactions? All these things are very standard stuff. You build up a system where somebody is requesting a transfer of money instead of one person saying, it's like this, I am giving money to Dr. Sarabjot. So my bank is saying, yes, money has been transferred. His bank is saying, yes, the money has been accepted. But in case of a blockchain, it becomes a much more larger network where everybody has to say, yes. It has been done. Then the transaction is added at the end of the block. At the transaction is accepted. So this is kind of a new thing that is happening. The blocks are being built up. So in case of say, I would like to take this case of more of a death and registration. It's a very unfortunate case study, but I mean, let's take this case where you have a death that has taken place. So how do you register and how do you tell? By the way, insurance companies have started to use this. I know some companies, and at least in India, who have started to use these kind of technologies. So you're trying to tell what kind of that there is a death that has happened, and the bank and the hospital is telling that, and then finally the the entire system is being built where you're telling the death certificate is issued, and your funeral homes are immediately told that there's a death that happened, and there's a complete flow of information, and that is being verified by all the stakeholders. And when all of them say yes, this transaction has happened, that unfortunate death has happened in a family, only then the entire beneficiary money is transferred, and the claim amount is settled at the end of the day, and the death and the death certificate is issued. So I will just take 1 minute. Is you make a career path in your blockchain. So one of the things that you can use is, if you want to be a very technical person, you don't want to be a technical person. I really like this, flow of things, information that is happening out there. What kind of a path that you can take, and what are the area that you can look at where you are trying to build up a foundations from very technology leaders position to say blockchain security professionals, blockchain architects, administrators, data scientists, and all that. And some of the certifications that are clear, that are currently available on the Blockchain Council. So, I mean, like you can either become a certified CODA expert, or a Hyperledger expert, or even a Hyperledger developer, blockchain developer. So there are opportunities for all of us to make great careers in these areas, in the field of finance, insurance, and we all can make a lot of money and do great work as we go about. Question is the path that we need liking as per our own skills that we have, where we feel we are very comfortable with certain things. It's up to us as individuals, how do we take it forward. So that was thing from my side, and I will be very happy to take more questions as we go about. Please feel free.
Thank you very much, sir. That was very, very interesting, and a very wide range of technologies that you introduced everyone to. Dibjot Kaur, I believe you have a question.
Sir, I have a question
Yes.
which is not related to this presentation actually.
Please.
Actually, I am working on a data set which is a stock market related data.
Right.
Where the data which is available, the high price, low, close, and open price, whatever it may be, all the price are correlated with each other.
Right.
Since all the values are almost nearby, all the values are correlated, and when I direct correlation map, it is showing all one highly correlated. What is the best way to deal with? Which are the components we can take to do a best model, and which algorithm would be best?
So what exactly are you trying to build? I mean, that's one thing. Let me ask you, what exactly are you trying to do? When you say algorithms to build a solution, what is this? What is the problem statement you have? Are you trying to build up a portfolio, or are you trying to find out the value of the stock market, what stock price, or what exactly you're trying to do?
Yes, closing price. Closing price is a Y variable, which I have taken based upon.
Sorry.
Yeah. Closing price is the Y variable.
Yeah.
And based upon that, the closing price would be the prediction what we have to do.
You are trying to basically predict the closing price, right?
Yes, yes.
So one of the ways I would suggest is you should apply a simulation model, and that is called as Monte Carlos.
Sorry, sir?
Monte Carlo simulation models. That's one of the good ones that have been applied across the trading industry.
Okay.
The banking finance industry does use a lot of these Monte Carlo simulation models, and you can read a lot of stuff around it, and you need to understand fundamentals out there, certain fundamentals out there. One is the Black-Scholes model you need to look at, how the stock markets are, stock prices are being built. Also the Bachelor model that is there. There are a few other models. So if you can also be more specific to the kind of stock that you're dealing with, I can give you more specific, answer to this question. So I would request that you give me a very specific sector that you're targeting. So there are models built for every I would say sectors. So the oil and gas has got their own models. Similarly, for the gas, for the interest rate derivatives, there are their own models. So can you be more specific And if you can write,
Yes, actually, there is no particular stock which we are dealing with. Actually, we have downloaded a data set from NSE of 2018 stock market of all the stocks, around 1,500 companies.
Okay.
In that, I have selected it 3 stocks. One is in uptrend, one is in flat trend, one is in downtrend.
Correct. So you're basically trying, as I said, then you should try something called as Monte Carlo simulations. It really works very well.
Okay.
I have built a lot of models for some of the consulting firms that I was working with earlier. So I've spent about 7-8 years in this field, in trading industry. So trust me, it works very well.
Okay.
And it's very widely and popularly used. It can be a good simulation model. But please be careful when you're doing the simulation because it does take a bit of a time. So perhaps if you can use cloud computing, it'll be better instead of using it on your server or a laptop.
Okay.
You'll get a faster result of that.
Okay.
Niharika, you have a question? Or is your hand up since the last time?
I think it's here, up from the last time.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, great. Sir, thank you so much for having such a wonderful interactive session with us. And I hope that you will come again and visit us, whether it is physically after the COVID scenario or in this online mode, cyber mode, and continue to expose us to all the wonderful applications that you have worked on in the number of years in this industry. And we really enjoyed, at least I for one really enjoyed the presentation. So thank you again, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sarabjot, and thank you everybody. It was really nice interacting, and I mean, as I've always said, the more you interact, the more you learn. So please feel free to question. There's nothing wrong in questioning. I really had a great time interacting with one and all. And thank you for your kind words again, Dr. Sarabjot. It was very nice talking with one and all.
All right. And thank you everyone for attending as well. And we'll see you next Saturday with the next webinar that you'll hear on LinkedIn and so on. All right. Take care. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And please be safe. Thank you.